check it out later. I figured it out this morning. All right, here we go. So we'll talk about plants. I'm going to talk about sort of today mostly about the different parts of some plants. You know what it's called when a seed starts to grow? There's a word for it.
It begins with a G.
Yep.
Germination?
Yeah, good. So this is a seed germinating. Kind of neat to see the different stages. We'll talk about that a little more towards the end of this section, but yeah, that's a seed germinating. All right, so you guys already told me in the beginning of class, question of the day, the major characteristics of plants. So yes, they're multicellular. Plants are made of many cells. You also told me they're autotrophic. Plants don't need to eat other things to get energy. They can make glucose through what process? Photosynthesis. And that happens in the chloroplast. Here in this diagram, you see those small little green circles within each cell. Those are the chloroplast. That's where photosynthesis happens. They're also eukaryotic. They have a nucleus. Also, plants are able to reproduce both sexually and asexually. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Those are sort of the general characteristics of the plant. So we've looked at plant cells back when we were studying cells. What is this? Who could name some organelle? Raise your hand, please. What organelle is this? Looks like an avocado in the middle of a plant cell. Alex? That's the nucleus. How about these things here? Grace? Those are the chloroplasts. Yep. How about this thing over here? Jenna?
That's the vacuole.
That's the vacuole. Good. How about this stuff sort of near the nucleus? Ethan? Yep. Yep, that's ER with ribosomes attached to it. How about these little red things, these beans with the folds inside? Luke? Yeah, good. All right, so you guys remember lots of the organelles of the plant. Excellent. So when we think about plants, we're in the plant kingdom. There's two big groups of plants. We're going to really only focus on one of them. We're going to focus on vascular plants. But there are a group of plants called the non-vascular plants. Okay? Vascular plants, the ones we're going to focus on, are probably almost every plant that you're familiar with is on this side. They're vascular plants. Okay? These are plants that have special tubes within them to transport material around. If you look, what is this? You know what this is a picture of?
Celery?
Yeah, a piece of celery. And in celery, you see there's those like circular areas you see when you cut it in half. Those circular areas are these tubes which carry water around the plant. The other plants are the non-vascular plants. They don't have these tubes. They can't really move water from one place to another very well. So the non-vascular plants, usually they're pretty small because basically every part of the plant needs to be near water. And they live in generally wet areas. You're familiar probably with mosses. Mosses which could grow on a rock or on a log or something like that. Mosses are non-vascular plants. You would find moss in a wet area. Grows very low. Okay, sort of spreads out. That's because they don't have tubes to move this water around. Moss can't grow to be 10 feet tall because the parts at the top wouldn't be able to get water from the bottom. There are some other non-vascular plants, these liverworts and hornworts, but you're probably most familiar with moss. We're going to spend most of our time, though, talking about vascular plants, since that's what we're all most familiar with, what we see more commonly. So the vascular plants have these tubes for moving things around. And in plants, the kind of things that need to be moved from place to place are, like I said, water, but also nutrients, sugar, minerals. Those things need to be moved in the plant. Zach?
Is ivy a kind, like a type?
Yeah, ivy would be a vascular plant, yep.
Okay.
So this word vascular, where have you probably heard of it before? Or that in another word? Something vascular.
Like a disease?
Yeah, vascular diseases, or what, a body system. Cardiovascular system, meaning your heart. And vascular means the tubes, your blood vessels. And so plants have vessels in them, tubes, ducts, whatever you want to call them. And they're sort of like pipes that run throughout the plant, taking things from place to place. And there's two types of tubes running through plants, called the xylem and the phloem. The xylem is the tube that carries water. Now, where do plants get water? From the soil. They absorb it into their roots. But if you imagine like a tree that's 30 feet tall, somehow that water needs to get from the roots all the way up to the top, to the leaves, the top of the tree and all the other parts of the plant. So it's the xylem which transports that water. There's also minerals dissolved in that water that the plant absorbs. The other type of tube is called the phloem. And the phloem, its job is to carry sugars from place to place within the plant. What sugar do plants make? Luke? Glucose. In photosynthesis, they make glucose. If you think of, again, of a tree, what part of the tree is making glucose? John?
The leaves?
Yeah, it happens in the leaves. Most photosynthesis happens up in the leaves of a tree or of a plant. But all parts of the plant actually need that sugar that's being produced. And so, to get that sugar from the leaves where it's being produced, all the other parts of the plant, it goes through these tubes, okay, that's called a phloem. Now, in the winter around here, what happens to the leaves of trees? They fall off in the autumn. So right now, you have a tree in your yard with no leaves on it. Is it making any sugar? No, it has no leaves. There's no photosynthesis going on. But it still needs energy to stay alive. It gets that energy because during the spring and the summer, while the plant was able to go through lots of photosynthesis, it stored that sugar. Stores it often in the roots and the trunk of the tree. And so that's what it lives on over the winter. And then it's going to need a lot of energy in the springtime. Because what do those trees need to do at the beginning of the spring? Brianna? Grow more leaves. That takes a lot of energy. So in the springtime, the stored up sugar makes its way back up to the top of the tree, and that energy is used to grow leaves. And sometimes people can put a little tap into the tree, especially maple trees, and what do they do with it?
They use it to make like sugars and stuff?
Yeah, they use it to make maple syrup. Now, when you put a tap in it, has anyone ever done this before? If you have lots of maple tree in your house, you could do it. But they do it around here all the time. When you put one of those taps in the tree, does maple syrup come out of it? No. What comes out? Sap. And sap is very watery. It has sugar in it, but if you taste it, it wouldn't taste sweet. Once they collect large amounts of that sap, what do they then do with it?
Boil it?
boil it, getting rid of the water and concentrating the sugars until you get syrup. But it takes a long time, a lot of sap to make a small amount of maple syrup. Now sometimes people have trouble remembering these two. Which one carries what? Here's my trick. What letter comes before X in the alphabet? W, for water. The xylem carries water. I remember the phloem carries sugar because syrup ends with a P, phloem starts with a P. Phloem carries sugar, which is what syrup is. Zach?
So when you take the sugar out of the tree, does it kill it?
No, because you're really, people when they tap the tree, they're only getting a small amount of the overall sugar, so the tree still has plenty of it to sustain it. Good question though. So here we just have a little diagram showing a flower growing. The xylem, okay, would carry the water up to the leaves, to the flower, and so forth. At the same time, the phloem brings the sugars that are being produced in the leaf to all the other parts of the flower. When you think about a vascular plant, there's sort of two systems that we talk about. The root system and the shoot system. They're actually usually about the same size or so. We don't sort of see the roots, obviously they're in the soil. But usually their roots are about as large as the rest of the plant. Well, here's another little thing you can do. You took like a piece of celery, split part of it in half, and you put each end in different food coloring and water mixtures. After a little while, you'll start to see the food coloring come up one side, the red comes here through those vascular bundles through the xylem, and then the blue's coming up the other side. That's because that's what the xylem does, carries that water. So we have the shoot system, which is the stem of the plant, the leaves of the plant, flowers, and then the underground portion is the root system. Roots are important, obviously. They absorb water, but also they help stabilize and hold the plant in place. If you ever go hiking through the forest, sometimes you'll see trees that were blown over, okay, and their roots are exposed. Often those trees had a very shallow root system that wasn't anchoring them into the ground very much. Especially see that in places with very thin soil, because the roots can't grow deep into the ground. So the roots are also responsible, as we just talked about, of storing up sugars. Storing food that's going to be used in the future. Because in the spring and summer, a plant can make more sugar than it actually needs to survive. So it can store that extra sugar in the roots until it's needed again. The leaves of a plant are obviously important because what happens there? What's that? They're made of cells, but what process? Well, there's lots of chlorophyll. Most chloroplast in a plant is usually in the leaves. Okay? And that's where what happens? Yeah, photosynthesis happens there. And as we know, photosynthesis needs what gas is needed from the atmosphere? Brandon? Yeah, carbon dioxide. And so, in order for photosynthesis to happen, carbon dioxide needs to be able to get into those cells in the leaves. And it does that through these special openings that are called stomates. If you look at, this is a microscope image of a leaf, the bottom side of a leaf. And what you see is you see all the cells, but also you see these circular things here. They look like lips. The middle is an opening. It's called the stomate. And that's where gas can get into the leaf, can get into the cells. They're surrounded by a couple cells called guard cells that can open and close. Because on hot, dry days, water can escape through these openings, and the plant can dry out pretty quickly. So when it's really hot and dry, these stomates will close down to prevent water, too much water, from leaving the plant. That process of water coming out of those stomates is called transpiration. All right, we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about flowers. What's the purpose of flowers in plants? Ava?
They release pollen.
Yeah. And why is that important? Jenna?
Does it help other plants grow?
Yeah, it's how plants reproduce. Okay. So, flowering plants, which are called angiosperms, they have flowers. And what a flower really is, it's the reproductive organ of a plant. That's what the flowers are. There are male parts of a flower, there are female parts of a flower. So they're the reproductive structures. We give somebody a bouquet of flowers for their birthday, and really just giving them the reproductive organs of a plant. And eventually, the flowers, after reproduction is completed, will form seeds, which is the next generation of that plant. Seeds like an embryo. Flowers come in lots of colors and sizes and varieties. We're going to talk a little bit about why that is. But for now, let's just talk about the parts. So when we look at a flower, okay, if you imagine like a rose, you know at the bottom of a rose flower, there's those like green leaves at the bottom. Those parts are called the sepals. It's like the base. It holds the rest of the flower, supports it. And then what's often colorful are what we call the petals. Sometimes the petals are meant to attract animals to help with pollination. Now I said earlier, plants can reproduce sexually or asexually. Flowers are for sexual reproduction. So all organisms that reproduce sexually have gametes. We call them sex cells. For example, in animals, it would be a sperm cell is the male sex cell, the male gamete. An egg cell is the female reproductive cell, the female gamete. Plants also have reproductive cells. They also have basically sperm and egg cells. We call them something different in plants. The male sex cell, which is equivalent to a sperm cell, is called pollen. That's what pollen is. Pollen is the male reproductive cell of a plant. The female reproductive cell is called the ovule, the egg. sexual reproduction, when the sperm cell and egg cell combine, call that fertilization. It's called the same thing in plants. When the pollen comes into contact with the ovule, fertilization has happened. So these are the reproductive structures of a flower. And so as we know, in sexual reproduction, two parent organisms are involved. What are the offspring like in sexual reproduction in comparison with the parents? Jenna?
Combination of both the parents.
Yeah, they have a combination of traits from both parents. In asexual reproduction, how many parent organisms are required?
One.
Ethan? One. And what are the offspring like?
Identical.
Yes. Only one parent involved, and the offspring are just copies. Plants can reproduce asexually. Things like grass, for example. What you see, this is an example of asexual reproduction. What you have is a plant growing, but then it sends out sort of a root horizontally, and then out of that grows smaller plants. But they're just copies of the original. There's no mixing of traits, no mixing of genes. That's a form of asexual reproduction. So if we look at a flower, we've all looked at a flower before, but maybe never really took notice of the parts within it. But a flower will often contain male reproductive structures and or female reproductive structures. The male reproductive parts are called the stamen. They're these things. And the two parts of the stamen are called the anther and the filament. The anther is the end of it. And that's where pollen is produced. The anther is where the pollen is made, the male sex cell of the flower. The sort of stalk that holds it up in the air, that's called the filament. So here, this flower in the diagram has 4 stamens that are producing pollen. Then this middle section of the plant, this is the female reproductive structure of the plant. It's called the pistil. And the pistil is made of 3 parts. The top part here, the very top, is called the stigma. This is where a pollen grain could land to fertilize this flower. So the stigma is what collects the pollen. Supporting that stigma is this tube called the style. And then at the very base, of the sort of enlarged area, is called the ovary. So just like in an animal, what is the ovary of a female animal? What does it do? Are you guys at health class?
No, we haven't gotten to the step.
You watched the movie in 5th grade. Remember that awkward day? The ovary. What does it do, Jonathan?
It's where the child is born.
Not quite.
And
It's what produces the eggs, produces the sex cell in females. That's what the ovary is. Trista, you have a question?
The kids in Miles never watched it.
You didn't watch the movie?
They
Gosh.
said we don't go on 6th grade and they started
The
going.
movie. Anyway, the ovary, this base of the pistil, that's where the female sex cell is. The ovule. So we have the male parts, the stamen, which produce the male sex cells, the pollen grains. And then we have the female reproductive parts, the ovary, which produces the female sex cell, the ovule. If we look at, this is like a lily, for example. You probably have seen these maybe growing around your house. You have daylilies, something like that. So again, you have all the parts we just talked about. You have the sepal, the green leaves often on the bottom supporting the flower. You have the usually brightly colored petals of the flower. You have the stamen. This one has 6 stamen. Those are the male parts. The anther, which produces the pollen, and then the filament, which just holds it up in the air. Then you have the female reproductive structure of the plant, the pistil, the stigma up top, where the pollen lands, and then the ovary, which contains the ovules inside of it. All right, any questions about the parts of the flower? Let's stop there.